Welcome to Kowloon is a first-person psychological horror game where you play as someone trying to find their home in the cramped, walled city of Kowloon, China. The game is available on Steam. Atmosphere. The game's atmosphere is built on a foundation of unease and tension. It has a strange, wide-angled perspective that makes every corridor seem like it's cramped, and the detailed environments feel overwhelming somehow. Everything is foreboding and eerie-looking. There's also a strange disconnect in the early game between all the laughing and sounds of people talking and the completely empty environments. And then an almost irreversible feeling event, the sound of all the people turns off at one point. And this single event deliberately destroys the illusion of a populated city. It's almost like you walked over the threshold into a nightmare and can't go back. Something else the game does really well is presenting something that looks like a person, be it clothes hanging up or people-shaped objects hanging out in the corner of your eye. And this, with the paranoia you get from the feeling that you aren't alone, makes walking the halls and empty streets of Kowloon extremely tense. The game dips down into terrifying by the midway point as the lights go out and you're exploring the almost surreal, twisted apartment blocks of a city that shouldn't exist. But where the game struggles is in its layout, with some of the winding passages to your goal being pretty confusing. It's not the game's downfall, but there are some moments where it may leave you struggling to figure out which way to go to progress. Overall, the atmosphere goes above and beyond, creating a dread-filled environment through foreboding and strange, maze-like visuals and sound design that's utilizing everything from pained moans to low rumbles and distorted crowds to eerie silences. That's one Harry Mason. Scares. The game doesn't really need to do much to push you over the edge with its fantastic atmosphere, but it still does an incredible job luring you into its trap time and time again. Though the jump scares that it uses aren't exactly groundbreaking or inventive, they work well enough to be shocking near enough every time. The linear nature of the environment sets you up perfectly for walking right into them, throwing you into a dark room with an objective to find something when you're unsure whether the room has someone or something lurking in it or not, builds the dread up until it shatters it with a random loud noise, which is almost the formula for all of the jump scares, but it never stops working because the space between these moments is too large for you to acclimatize to it. Sometimes it builds up to be nothing, and sometimes that's almost worse. There are some scripted events in a chase sequence, but the chase sequence didn't feel well constructed with the flashlight and the darkness, making it hard to see where you're supposed to run to get to safety, and the scripted event found near the end feeling a little out of place. Whilst these moments were disappointing, it matters very little. What the game did do well, it did well incredibly so. The jump scares the game uses were still very good despite being unoriginal. They never seemed to become predictable, which allowed them to be nerve-shattering, because when they aren't terrifying you, you crawl through the darkness, agonizing over the moment when they arrive again. That's two Harry Masons. Sound design. There's the undoubtable presence of infrasound lurking under the darkened environments. The extremely low rumble makes exploring these rooms unbelievably tense, but this is really all there is for soundtrack. Besides some random piano music, the sometimes overpowering rumble is monotonous, but does nothing but improve the atmosphere. The sound effects are layered over this, from the people talking to the very high quality sounds of doors opening and things clicking, as well as the unearthly screams of whatever residents still lurk in Kowloon. Though there are some problems with sounds being cut off before they finish playing, which is a bit of a shame. The game also uses strange guttural gurgling noises to attract attention or give you the feeling that something is lurking there, which is strangely unsettling. There's no real voice acting though, and the reverb and directional audio are flawless in preserving the immersion. The sound design itself isn't particularly complex, but it's used very well. Many things are in the right place at the right time, like it's a finely curated experience that never goes over when it doesn't need to. That's 3 Harry Masons. Gore. The game has some strung up bodies which are pretty unpleasant to behold, with exposed rib cages and skulls peeking out from underneath what remains of their head, and an entire room filled with body parts dangling from chains. But outside of this, the streets of Kowloon, which are reported to be home of unwarranted murders by the game's own story, are surprisingly devoid of blood. Hardly a complaint, but it felt like the game could have done more with the setting. That's 4 Harry Masons. Story. Welcome to Kowloon sees you playing as a young student trying to make yourself at home in an apartment you rented in Kowloon, the real-life walled city that was demolished in 1994 China. The events of the game really start with you trying to get used to your home before things take an unexpected turn and you're walking alone through the dark. There's not really much more story than this, with the game just being a series of events you pass through with potentially some environmental storytelling. The game explains it all in the end with a plot twist that isn't much of a plot twist with any prior knowledge of the real-world walled city of Kowloon. Ultimately, the story is a bit of a letdown, though it being disappointing doesn't really ruin the experience. It really could have been better though. Making the final score 4 out of 5 Harry Masons. Welcome to Kowloon is made by the same developer as From the Darkness, and it really keeps a lot of the same things that made the game so frightening, but it doesn't quite manage to stay as focused and tries some things that just don't work. It was fun for quite a while and really did startle me several times though. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion of horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I may decide to move out of Kowloon, I did not complain to the landlord and advise you don't either. There'll be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. Let's go check out Bumps in the Middle of the Night. Peace.